Hello and welcome to part 2 in a series of videos that I'm putting out where I break down all the fights taking place at UFC 236 from a betting perspective. Now in today's video I'm going to be covering off 3 fights, including the main event between Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier. And in part 1 of this video, which I will link to in the description below, you can find out how I feel about the co-main event between Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum. Now if every single video that I put out for UFC 236, including this one, gets 150 likes, I'll do a bonus live stream video on the day of UFC 236 where I'll be looking to give you guys a prop bet for every single fight taking place at UFC 236, and I'll also be answering all your questions in the live chat box of the live stream on YouTube. So hit the like button below, guys, if you want to see me do that, and I will schedule that live stream in the next few days so you can see exactly what time it's going to take place. I'll also try and figure out a time that's going to be reasonable for people in all time zones, so Australia, United States, Europe. I'll try and figure out a time that suits everyone. It'll probably be, an hour or two before the event starts. So if you want that, guys, please hit the like button below, and also if you're watching this video, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to me and it would help the channel grow. So now let's jump into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be Brandon Davis versus Randy Costa. Now, when it comes to Randy Costa, I'm going to be able to do something breaking down this fight that I've never been able to do before. I can actually show you Randy Costa's entire pro MMA career in less time than it's going to take me to break down this fight from a betting perspective. Now, before we get into how both these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, I just want to draw attention to the fact that Randy Costa's record is extremely padded. So he's very inexperienced at just 4-0. He's only had four pro MMA fights. And if we could take a look at the guys that he's fought, they are a very, very low level of opponents. So you can see in his last fight, he fought a guy with no wins and 1 loss. Then prior to that, he fought a guy with 5 wins, 9 losses. Prior to that, he fought Kenny Lewis, that made his pro MMA debut. And then before that, in Costa's pro debut, he fought someone called Stacey Anderson, who had no wins and 4 losses. So as you can see, Costa's record extremely padded. He's also very inexperienced, with all 4 of these fights ending in round 1. This fight ended in 42 seconds. This fight ended in 11 seconds. This fight ended in 46 seconds. So if you add up all the time that Costa has spent in his professional MMA career, it doesn't even equate to 1 full 5-minute round. And he has got 3 amateur fights here from way back in 2014, but these fights took place such a long time ago that they're just not really relevant anymore. Randy Costa is going to be a completely different fighter now to what he was back in 2014. But before we get into talking about this fight from a stylistic point of view, let's show all these fights, which are really only 3 or 4 minutes long. They're all available to watch online. And the first fight that I'm going to show you is Costa's last fight against Rob Fuller. So there's not really too much to talk about in the footage that I'm going to show you. I do believe that this is one of Costa's longer fights. I know 2 out of the 4 fights ended in literally less than 15 seconds. But here you can see Fuller getting very aggressive, putting a lot of pressure on Costa. Costa struggling with the pressure a little here, but then manages to drop Fuller. And this is pretty much how you'll see all of Costa's fights play out. They're just chaos, to be honest with you. Manages to get a takedown there, but wasn't really any proper technique on that takedown there. He kind of just threw Fuller to the ground, and then following up with ground and pound, eventually he gets the finish. So that was Randy Costa's last fight. As you can see, very, very fast-paced, very aggressive. Then his second fight was against a guy called Chris Thorne. So Thorne was, if we take a look, Thorne was 5 wins and 9 losses, so pretty low level guy on paper. Here we can see him shooting in on a nice deep single leg takedown. The mistake that Costa's actually making here, that I've got to call out, I've got to mention it, is that Costa's not really showing much respect to Thorne's wrestling here. As Thorne's shooting in on this deep single leg takedown, Costa should be using both of his free hands to try and get underhooks in play to stuff the takedown, but instead he actually chooses to throw strikes instead of defending the takedown. You see him throw strikes on a few different occasions. I prefer to see him fight for underhooks, get underhooks in play, then disengage and get the fight back to kickboxing range, which is where he wants to be. But gets away with it on this occasion, and now you'll see a little bit of Costa's aggression, which he shows in all of his fights, just walking his opponent down, basically using him as a human punching bag. And what I would say about Costa is his kicks are excellent. His kicks are very, very technical, very fast, very sharp. His boxing is a little bit sloppy, to be honest with you. Throws a lot of wide looping hooks, which people in the UFC will make him pay for, but here you can see throwing literally just a human punching bag, standing in front of Costa and taking everything that Costa can dish out. So we can see in this fight in particular, Costa has very, very nice technical kicks, but his boxing is a little bit sloppy, to be honest with you. There you can see a really wide hook that he threw, you know, more wide hooks, more wide punches, and he manages to get the finish there with a body shot in about 1 minute and 10 seconds. Then his next fight, this was against Kenny Lewis. So Kenny Lewis was making his pro debut in this fight. Here we can see Costa comes out, goes straight to work, aggressive as always. And it doesn't take him long to finish this fight at all. There he tries to land the question mark kick, setting Kenny Lewis up for the head kick. And then he does land it inside like 11 seconds. It is all over. You can see here, sets him up for the head kick with a question mark kick. Misses. Second time he throws it, it is all over. Very nice head kick KO there. And then in the last fight that I want to show you, this is against Stacey Anderson in Costa's pro MMA debut. And I think he gets this done in about 14 seconds. Again, coming out very fast, very aggressive. And actually Anderson is the aggressor here. Again, Costa trying to set him up for the head kick. And again, it doesn't take long to land the kill shot. Or actually, this isn't a kill shot. He hurts him with a right kind of uppercut to hook there. Briefly gets taken down. But as he pops back up, you can see again, not for the first time, using Anderson as a human punching bag here to get the TKO finish any second now. As you can see, very aggressive, but wild, reckless punches, just wild punches, and manages to get a TKO finish there. So that is Randy Costa's entire pro MMA career in literally less than 4 minutes, guys. You've seen it all. And the problem with what I've just shown you is that we really haven't learned that much about Costa at all. I mean, we don't know what his cardio's like. We don't know what his chin's like. We don't know how he's going to deal with being put in a bad position. We don't know how he deals with adversity. We don't know what his ground game's like. We don't really know what his takedown defense is like. All we know is that his boxing's quite reckless and sloppy. He throws a lot of wild looping hooks, Deontay Wilder style. But his kicks are by far his biggest strength. Very technical, very powerful, very sharp, good kicking technique. Now, based on what we've just seen, there are obviously a lot of unanswered questions about Randy Costa, but also some stuff that looks good. You know, he is aggressive. His kicks are devastating. And some of the other things we know about Costa is that he trains at Lauzon MMA with Dan Lauzon and Joe Lauzon. And he also spends quite a bit of time training with UFC fighters Rob Font and Calvin Kattar, who are obviously very, very talented, good technical strikers themselves. And something else to bear in mind is that Randy Costa has taken this fight on 3 weeks' notice, although he has been training for a fight against a different opponent on scheduled to fight him on October 6th. So even though Randy Costa is taking this fight on short notice, technically it's not like he's been at home playing video games, eating pizza. He has actually been training to fight someone. So as you can see, he's fast, explosive, technical, powerful. But what I would also say about Costa from the fights that you saw him in is that he was also sprinting. He was very aggressive in the majority of those fights. And when you face someone like Brandon Davis, very experienced, very technical Muay Thai striker. In fact, Davis was a Muay Thai coach at a gym in Mississippi. When you look at Davis' fight, you can just tell that he's a very experienced, very comfortable striker. And that is basically backed up by the fact that in 15 pro fights, he has never been KO'd. All his losses come by decision and submission. And that really is his main weakness when I mention the submissions. It's just, he is a pure Muay Thai fighter. So in the past, against some of his opponents, his takedown defense and also his ground game has let him down. But in 15 fights, he's never been KO'd. And that's interesting because when you watch Brandon Davis fight, he does eat a lot of shots. He is very hittable. He does stand right in front of his opponent with his hands low and his chin there to be hit. But Davis is such an experienced striker. He's so comfortable striking that he sees everything. He's very aware of what his opponent's doing, and he does a very good job of riding the shots and absorbing the power and using subtle head movement and footwork just to take the sting off his opponent's shots. Very comfortable, doesn't mind being hit at all. And that's interesting because with a guy like Randy Costa, who's aggressive, you know, quite sloppy boxing technique, if Costa comes out the gate 1,000 miles an hour looking to take Brandon Davis out, there's a really good chance Davis is going to be able to weather the early storm, use his experience, use his Muay Thai technique to just survive the first few minutes, you know, drag Costa into the second round, which is territory he's never really been in before, and make this fight very interesting. Now, Randy Costa, if he's a smart guy, and you'd assume he's a smart guy, having the likes of Joe Lozon behind him, he will know that this is going to be a massive step up in competition for him. So he's going to need to do something differently now that he's competing in the UFC against these world-class fighters. So I'm interested to see whether Randy Costa will come out aggressive, like we've seen from him in those fights I just showed you, and look to take Davis out, or will he understand that Davis is a tricky opponent, a tough opponent, and will Costa look to pace himself a little bit better instead of sprinting and risking gassing himself out? Because he will not be able to fight at that high pace for 15 minutes. It's just not sustainable. You can't sprint for that length of time. But that's interesting because if he does come into this fight and paces himself better and he just fights a little bit smarter, a bit more tactical, will he be as effective? You know, is Costa's strength the fact that he's aggressive and he catches his opponent off guard before they have a chance to get comfortable and find their range, and he lands a kill shot before they can get comfortable in there? You know, will he be as effective fighting in kickboxing range, trying to outstrike a guy like Davis? It's tough to say. Like I say, there's so many unanswered questions about Randy Costa in this fight. So, if we just make sure that I have said everything that I want to say. Yes, okay, so to summarize this fight from a betting perspective, if we take a look at the current odds, so we have got Brandon Davis currently at around about an average of 1.66, which gives him moneyline odds of about minus 152 for an implied probability of 60%. And then if we look at Randy Costa, the average odds on him at the moment are around about 2.35, which is plus 135 for an implied probability of 43%. So straight off the back, you know what I'm going to say, guys, because there are so many unanswered questions on Costa, there's no way that we can bet him. He is unbettable for me. But Brandon Davis is obviously an interesting one. He's got 4 fights in the UFC. We know he's got a good chin. We know he's got good cardio. We know he's very tough, and we know he is a technical Muay Thai fighter that can cause Randy Costa some problems. But my issue with betting this fight is just because Randy Costa's never fought anyone before, and because this is a massive step up in competition for him, at the end of the day, you can only beat what's in front of you. And he clearly showed that he's got fight-ending kicks and he's quite dangerous. And there's still so much we don't know about him. We still don't know that much about his takedowns, his ground game, his wrestling. And we know that's been a weakness of Brandon Davis in the past. So the way I basically feel about this fight is I do think Davis is a reasonably good bet, based on the fact that this is a giant step up in competition for Costa. You know, he's only had 4 pro MMA fights. He hasn't even spent 5 minutes in a cage yet, you know, competing against anywhere near a decent level of opponent. And we know a massive percentage of fighters that make their UFC debut lose their debut. So straight away, a bet on Davis becomes attractive to me. But I'm not going to personally bet on him for 2 reasons. The first reason being, I've already got quite a lot of money on the table in bets on UFC 236. And if you watch part 1 of this video and the remaining 3 parts, you know, parts 1, 2, 3 and 4, you'll see that I've got a good amount of money on the table on this card. And personally, I don't like to have too many bets or too much money at risk on one card, because on any given night, every single bet can lose. Every single fighter can lose. And I don't like my account balances and my bankroll to take any kind of significant hit. So the fact that I've already got a few bets on UFC 236 that I absolutely love, in order to add more money and more bets on this card, I'm going to need to see a really special opportunity, a really good opportunity. And I don't think Davis is that great of an opportunity, because it is a gamble based on the fact that we really don't know that much about Costa. Davis doesn't have the best takedown defense or ground game, and Costa's kicks look nasty, to be honest with you. Now, the second reason why I'm not going to bet on Brandon Davis here is because, like I say to you guys in these videos all the time, I make the majority of my money live betting on the UFC. So there's really no need for me to bet on Brandon Davis pre-fight here, because if we look at his last few fights, you know, if we take his loss by submission against Zabit Magomedsharipov out of it, and look at his, you know, 6 fights after that, you know, 5 of his 6 fights went the distance, and the only time that he got a KO finish in his last, you know, 6 fights, 7 fights, when he finished a guy with a record of 5 wins and 12 losses, so probably a super low level guy. So it's unlikely that Brandon Davis is going to get an early finish in this fight, taking away my opportunity to live bet it. So I can afford to just watch how the first few minutes of this fight unfold, get a read on both guys, and then make my decision if I want to bet on Brandon Davis or not. So that's the second reason. There's just no real need for me to bet on Brandon Davis pre-fight here. I've already got bets on this card I love. Don't want to put money in danger in a marginal situation. But having said that, it really depends on your risk tolerance. Like I say, I don't think Brandon Davis is a bad bet. I think he's a reasonably good bet. If you're the type of guy that's a bit more loose, likes to gamble a bit, likes to place a lot of bets on a lot of different fights to make the fights more interesting, Davis definitely isn't a bad bet. But personally, I'm going to pass on it. So now if we go into the next fight that I want to talk about, guys, we are going to look at Belal Muhammad versus Curtis Millender. Now, in yesterday's video, in part 1, I said that the odds on some of these fights on UFC 263, is it UFC 260? Yeah, UFC 236, sorry, I was thinking it's not 263, that's years away. So a lot of the odds on UFC 236 are moving in strange ways and are very, very inaccurate. And I spoke in particular about one fight in part 1 of this video where I said I felt the odds were very inaccurate. And this is another fight where I feel the odds are really, really off, guys. You know, in yesterday's video, I said that I felt that there was an incredible amount of value on Israel Adesanya's odds at the moment. And it makes absolutely no sense to me that Israel Adesanya's odds are actually improving. Because as we know, the way the odds move, in order for a fighter's odds to improve, it means that people must be betting the other side. So this means that in order for Adesanya's odds to have improved like this, people must be betting Kelvin Gastelum. And Gastelum is such a bad bet that I don't know who could be doing that. Obviously, the casual betting public, the people that just come out for the big events and just look to bet the big fights, are thinking Gastelum's got a legit chance of winning this, and they are putting their money in a lot of danger by placing a bad bet on Gastelum. But we're also seeing a similar thing happen with Belal Muhammad. We can see that his odds have actually improved from 1.67 up to, well, they were actually up to 1.85 today, although this chart doesn't really reflect that. And that odds movement's absolutely crazy, because again, for Belal Muhammad's odds to move like this, it would mean that Curtis Millender's odds, it would mean that people are betting Curtis Millender, which makes absolutely no sense. Because again, Curtis Millender is a terrible bet. And the reason why I say Curtis Millender is a terrible bet is because he has probably the worst takedown defense in the welterweight division. I can't think of anyone with worse takedown defense at 170 pounds than Curtis Millender. And let me know in the comments, guys, if you agree with me. Can't think of anyone. Curtis Millender's ground game is at such a low level. Remember in yesterday's video where I was talking about Adesanya and Gastelum, Adesanya does the team alpha male style of defending takedowns, where as soon as his butt hits the floor, he treats the floor like lava, and he immediately pops back to his feet. He doesn't let his opponent flatten him out and put his shoulders flat on the canvas. He gets straight back up to his feet. Whereas Millender's the complete opposite. As soon as you put his butt on the floor, he rolls to his back and accepts being on the bottom. And that isn't good, because when Millender's on the bottom, he's at such a low level that he doesn't know how to improve his position or work his way back to his feet, which means if a guy takes him down 10 seconds into a round, he's getting 4 minutes and 50 seconds of top control, because there's not a damn thing that Curtis Millender can do to get back to his feet other than pray the referee stands them up. If you go and watch Curtis Millender's past fights, you'll actually see him looking over to his corner when he's on the ground, because he simply doesn't know what to do. He's very confused by what to do because he's at such a low level. And that is a major concern. That really is a major concern. I would recommend going back and watching how bad Millender is on the ground, guys, because these fights against Elezu, Zaleski, Dos Santos and Sia Baja de Zada from December and March were really not that long ago. So if he showed massive weaknesses in his takedown defense and ground game in these fights, he just hasn't had enough time to improve since then. You know, he got badly exposed by Dos Santos in his last fight, and that was only, you know, just around a month ago. So with Belal Muhammad, obviously he is primarily a striker. Curtis Millender's a striker as well, but Belal Muhammad does have a nice deep double leg takedown, and from what I've seen, Belal Muhammad shoots in on a really deep takedown around about an average of once every round, unless he's facing an opponent where he's just had to accept there's no way that he can get this fight to the ground. So trust me, Belal Muhammad definitely has the technique to take Millender down whenever he wants. Absolutely no doubt about it, guys. Millender's takedown defense is absolutely shocking, to be honest with you. And what I really like about Belal Muhammad is when he completes a takedown, he moves straight into half guard, and he doesn't look to go for any submissions and give up position. He just stays in half guard and rains down really, really vicious ground and pound on his opponent who's on the bottom. And another thing I like about Muhammad is that he's very active from top position. He's able to generate an enormous amount of power from ground and from top position. And that prevents the referee from standing him up, because he is so active. He's constantly doing damage, constantly working on the ground. So where Millender will often just look to hold on to his opponent and hope for a stand-up, he's not going to get it with Belal in top position, because Muhammad doesn't stop working. Now, with MMA, as we know, we never work in absolutes. There are always many different ways that a fight could play out. And if this fight stays standing, there's no doubt about it that Millender has an absolutely huge advantage. He's very tall, very long, does a really good job of fighting long, does a good job of using his range. He's got legit KO power in every strike. And Belal Muhammad doesn't have the best striking defense. We've seen Belal Muhammad rocked, dropped, knocked out multiple times in his career. He is very hittable. But unfortunately, even though Millender's got a 7-inch reach advantage in this fight, and even though he's very tall, a lot of these guys with this type of body, you know, long, lean, skinny frame, they do have very bad takedown defense, and Millender's a victim of that. That's why Adesanya is kind of an outlier. He's got a similar body type to Millender in that he's very long, lean, skinny, but his takedown defense is very, very, very good, and he's very difficult to hold down. So similar body types, but just two completely different approaches to grappling. So from a striking point of view, if Millender can keep this fight standing, he should beat Belal Muhammad relatively comfortably. But I do believe Belal Muhammad's going to be able to take this fight to the ground whenever he wants to, because Millender's takedown defense is so bad. The only way I see Muhammad losing this fight is if he gets complacent and decides not to take a fight to the ground early in the round and he chooses to engage in a bit of kickboxing with Millender, or if he walks onto, you know, a big shot while he's looking to close the distance and take this fight to the ground. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, guys, Millender's current average odds are around about 2.10, which is plus 110, give him an implied probability of 48%. There is no way I would bet Millender, guys. He is a terrible bet. Do not bet him. Please do not bet him. And then if we look at Belal Muhammad, his odds have actually declined quite a bit today. I actually recorded a version of this video earlier and the video file corrupted, so this is the second take. And when I recorded the first video, Belal Muhammad was around about 1.85, but now 1.80 is the best you can get on him, which is minus 125, giving him an implied probability of 56%, and that is a bargain, guys. He's a brilliant bet. You know, at the end of the day, if you know, Belal Muhammad, you know, gets brutally KO'd, walks onto a head kick or catches a flying knee and gets KO'd in 10 seconds. I know there's going to be loads of morons in the comments trolling me for weeks saying Belal Muhammad was a bad bet, but those guys are literally fucking losers. Please don't listen to them. Trust me, go do your own research. Take a couple of hours out of your day. Go watch, Belal Muhammad's last 3 or 4 fights. Go watch Curtis Millender's last 3 or 4 fights, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, anything can happen in MMA. Like I say, Belal Muhammad might walk onto a KO and get death shotted. It could absolutely happen. But based on all the information we have available at the moment, at these odds, Belal Muhammad is an absolutely brilliant bet, and I think he stands a very good chance of getting the job done at UFC 236. So that is that fight out the way, guys. Next fight that I want to go into is the main event between Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier. And this is a fight that's given me a bit of a headache, guys, I won't lie. This fight is definitely giving me a headache, and I'm going to try and keep this brief, but I do have a lot to say about this fight. As you can see here, I've got 2 pages of research. I'm just going to say 2 things straight away, which are basically going to form the foundation for everything I've got to say about this fight. So what I would say is that I believe that Max Holloway will absolutely dominate this fight if he can keep it standing. I believe his striking, his boxing, everything is in a completely different league to Dustin Poirier's. Holloway is very fluid, very technical, very fast, very crisp, very precise. Whereas Poirier has legit KO power. He's a tricky southpaw, but Poirier is there to be hit. If you go back and watch Poirier's last 5 fights, guys, you'll see that he gets lit up a lot. His opponents really do land on him in every fight. And Holloway is a volume striker, starts a little bit slow, but gets better as the fight progresses. And when Holloway finds his range, he is devastating. Excellent boxer, fights with his hands low, sees everything coming, rides the punch as well. He's got a good chin, and I really think if he can keep this fight standing, I think he'll pick Poirier apart and dominate. Now you might actually be rushing to your betting site now to lock in a bet on Holloway, but it gets complicated. Now you are probably under the impression that Max Holloway has amazing takedown defense, and I wouldn't blame you, because no one's really been able to take him down and grind him out, ever, to be honest with you, or for a very long time. And Holloway's kind of built up this reputation for having amazing takedown defense. But I've got to be honest with you guys, I'm not completely sold. Now, on paper, Holloway's takedown defense looks excellent. If we look at the stats at Fight Metric here, we can see that across 19 fights in the UFC, which is an enormous amount of fights for a 27-year-old, Holloway has actually defended 83% of takedown attempts in his 19 UFC fights, which is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. That 83% takedown defense is excellent. However, we do need to put a little bit of an asterisk next to it. Because if we go back through Holloway's career and his record, we can see that he hasn't really fought many guys at all that can test his takedown defense. Hasn't really fought many strong offensive wrestlers at all. Brian Ortega is primarily a grappler, but doesn't really have any offensive wrestling. Jose Aldo doesn't try to take guys down, neither does Anthony Pettis. Now, Ricardo Lamas is regarded as a grappler, but he has never really had the best offensive wrestling. If you've got, memories in your head about Lamas being a strong wrestler, his fights usually end up on the ground as a result of crazy scrambles, or because his opponent has tried to take him down and he's reversed position. Ricardo Lamas doesn't actually do a very good job of getting his opponents to the ground. He doesn't have the best offensive wrestling. Now, what's interesting about that is that Ricardo Lamas did actually probably put on his best display of offensive wrestling against Max Holloway in this fight that I've seen throughout much of Lamas's career. And to be honest with you, he drew a complete blank. He hit a lot of really deep takedown attempts on Holloway, and Holloway completely shut him down. It was a flawless demonstration of takedown defense, and Holloway looked great. But as we keep going, Jeremy Stephens doesn't try and take his opponents down. Charles Oliveira does now, But when this fight took place back in 2015, Charles Oliveira was more of a pure BJJ Muay Thai guy, didn't really have any offensive wrestling back then, and this fight ended within 1 minute and 40 seconds due to an injury to Charles Oliveira. So we can see Cub Swanson doesn't try and take guys down. Cole Miller's got no offensive wrestling, he's a BJJ guy. Kira Coruscant's a striker, Clay Collard's a striker. Andre Fili does use wrestling now, but again, this was back in 2014. Back then, Andre Fili was just a kickboxer. He's a different guy now. Didn't try and take Holloway down at all, and this fight was also Andre Fili's UFC debut on short notice. Will Chopper's a kickboxer, Conor McGregor's a striker, and lo and behold, all the way back in 2013, just under 6 years ago, the last time that Holloway fought a strong offensive wrestler in Dennis Bermudez, and look what happened, guys. Holloway actually lost by split decision, and to be honest with you, Holloway showed some things in this fight which really concerned me, guys. He really did concern me. What I saw from Holloway in this fight against Bermudez is that he's very good at stuffing the initial shot, the initial takedown shot, because he fights with his hands low. He can get those underhooks in play nice and early. But what I didn't like about Holloway in this fight was that when Dennis Bermudez had the initial takedown attempt shut down and he changed the takedown into something else and was able to get Holloway to the ground, Holloway accepted being on the bottom and rolled to his back. So remember in part 1 of this video, we spoke about Adesanya instantly popping back to his feet when he gets taken down. He treats the ground like lava. As soon as his butt hits the floor, pops immediately back to his feet. And then on the opposite side of that, we had Millender, who as soon as his butt touches the floor, he rolls to his back, lets his shoulders go flat on the canvas, and enables his opponent to establish a dominant position. You want the fighters you bet on to behave like Adesanya when they get taken down, not like Millender. And unfortunately, if you go back and watch this fight between Holloway and Bermudez, you can see that Holloway took the Millender route and accepted being on the bottom. And in that fight, Holloway looked very, very vulnerable on his back. Was not good on his back at all, guys. And that's a big concern. Now, this fight was 6 years ago. And if you go back and watch this fight, it's clear that Holloway has improved millions of %. His striking's improved a lot, everything. He's just a completely different guy. So it's very possible that in the last 6 years, Holloway would have made significant improvements to his takedown defense and ground game. And there's no way that Poirier is going to be able to take him down. That's very possible. However, this performance is a concern because, like I say, in the last 6 years since this, haven't really seen Holloway's takedown defense or ground game tested. And remember, Holloway does train at a small gym in Hawaii, not exactly the best place to develop strong wrestling and strong takedown defense. So that is a bit of a concern. And Dustin Poirier is known for being a striker, but trust me, he is also a very strong wrestler and he has a very high level ground game. Dustin Poirier has been training at American Top Team for a massive percentage of his career against some of the best fighters and the best grapplers in MMA. He's a very high level grappler, guys. Even before Dustin Poirier was graded as a white belt, he was submitting black belts on the regional MMA circuit in Louisiana. Dustin Poirier is absolutely legit on the ground. He has a very nice double leg takedown. And on the ground, he has got the skills to cause Holloway significant problems. He is nasty. So that is a slight concern, guys. So from a betting perspective, this fight is giving me a real headache. Because if we look at the odds, right? So the current average odds available on Max Holloway are around about 1.48. which is minus 208, giving him an implied probability of 68%. So to bet on Holloway here and get any value, you need to give him a 75% or better chance of winning this fight, which against a guy like Holloway is tough to do. Even though I believe Holloway has the skills to completely dominate Poirier if this fight stays standing, Poirier still hits hard, and on the ground, Holloway looked very vulnerable against Dennis Bermudez, and there's a chance Poirier could submit him if he can get this fight to the ground. So I do really think Holloway wins this, guys, but I don't love the odds. I really don't. And if we take a look at the average odds available on Dustin Poirier at the moment, they're an average of around about 2.75, which is plus 175, giving him an implied probability of 36%. Now, to be honest with you, because I believe Max Holloway will dominate this fight if it stays standing, and because I truly believe that in the last 6 years, Holloway will have made massive improvements with his takedown defense and ground game, I would not bet on Poirier at these odds, guys. I really think that Poirier is a bad bet. I would not bet him. I really recommend you pass on Poirier. I think Poirier is a very, very bad bet here, because if Holloway can keep this fight standing, Poirier is going to get dominated and very probably knocked out in the second or third round. But that presents the question, is Holloway worth a bet? And the answer to that, guys, is I am not sure. I really am not sure. The way I'm approaching this personally, guys, is I don't love the odds on Holloway at all with an implied probability of 68%, because Poirier's a nightmare. He hits very hard, and if he can get the fight to the ground, it could be tough for Holloway. The way I'm going to play this, I'll be completely honest with you. What I'm going to do with this is I personally cap Holloway at around about a 70% chance of winning this fight. I really do, because I do think that it's more likely that Holloway has made massive improvements to his takedown defense and ground game than it is him looking like he did against Bermudez, right? And if he does keep this fight standing, he's going to dominate. And to be honest with you, even if Dustin Poirier does get a few takedowns in the first couple of rounds, and he does grind Holloway out and win the first couple of rounds with some top control, as long as Holloway can avoid being submitted, I really don't think it's the end of the world if Poirier did start strong and use his wrestling to cause Holloway problems. Because as we know, Holloway gets better as the fight progresses, while Poirier, even though he's got great cardio, he tends to become a lot more hittable and a lot more predictable and a bit more sloppy as the fight progresses. So I think as long as Holloway can avoid being finished on the ground early in the fight, he will start to do way better in the third, fourth and fifth rounds. So I'm happy to cap Holloway at 70% based on what I've just said. But with that being the case, there's not enough of a margin for me at these odds to bet him. Now, what I'm hoping for is, it's quite clear that there's a lot of casual money coming in on this event. A lot of recreational gamblers that don't really put that much research into the fighters they bet on. They don't really understand the sport of MMA. And you can tell that's happening because this week we've seen, in my opinion, the two best bets on the card, which are Israel Adesanya and Belal Muhammad. We've seen their odds improve. Now, what should be happening is that Adesanya and Muhammad's odds should have been declining, because more people should have been betting Muhammad and Adesanya because they're the best bets on the card. We're actually seeing the opposite. People are actually betting on Millender and Gastelum. And Millender and Gastelum, whichever way you dress it up, are two very bad bets, which means that there must be a lot of dumb money betting this event, is what I'm trying to tell you. So I'm hoping that that same dumb money will bet Poirier, because remember, we're still about 8 or 9 days away from the event at the time of recording this. And when the UFC hype machine gets into full effect and they start throwing out embedded videos and they start throwing out countdown videos to mislead the betting public into thinking this is a really close competitive fight, and when you get, you know, these guys, Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, that don't really study the sport like we study it, when they start putting out their predictions videos and talking about this fight and hyping it, everyone's going to make this sound like a very close competitive matchup, a fight that could go back and forth, a stand-up war, when in reality, if it stays standing, we know that it's very likely Holloway completely dominates. We know that because we've done our homework. So what I'm hoping is all these hype men, you know, MMA media, UFC hype machine, everyone basically convinces the betting public into thinking this fight's closer than the odds suggest. Money comes in on Poirier, which would then improve the odds on Holloway. That's what I'm hoping for. Because if Holloway was closer to, say, 1.59, which is minus 170, that would give him an implied probability of 63%. And 1.59 isn't really that far away from where we are at the moment. You know, the current odds are around minus 210. So, you know, minus 170, not that far away at all. But the odds of 1.59 minus 170. That would give Holloway an implied probability of 63%, meaning with me capping him at 70%, with me giving him a 70% chance of winning this fight, I would get a nice 7% margin over the bookies. So the way I look at this fight, guys, is I'm just going to see what happens over the next 8 or 9 days. I'm going to wait for the weigh-ins. I'm going to see what both guys say in the fight week interviews and see how they look at weigh-ins, see how they look at the stare-downs. I'm going to make my decision probably on fight day or much closer to the fight as to whether I'll be betting Holloway. I sure as hell won't be betting Poirier. I'm hoping that there are some people out there that believe the UFC hype machine, believe the MMA media, and they fire off bets on Poirier and give me better odds on Holloway. So that is it for today's video, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to my channel. I want this channel to grow so I can keep doing these videos for you guys. Please also hit the like button. And if this video and every other video that I put out for UFC 236 gets 150 likes, I will do that bonus live stream video on fight day. But nice one, guys. I'll be back tomorrow with part 3.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.